Somewhere in the hills above Los Angeles, there is a house where a Christmas tree still stands in the front room. The presents are still wrapped underneath it. Nobody has opened them since 1959. For more than 50 years, nobody lived in that house at all, and almost nothing inside it was ever touched. That house is coming up at number 1, and once you hear what happened inside it, and what happened to it afterward, you will understand why it might be the strangest, saddest abandoned property in the entire state of California. Today we are counting down 10 abandoned homes across California with disturbing pasts, grand mansions, desert hideouts, a reform school on a hilltop, an entire neighborhood swallowed by an environmental disaster. Every location and date in this video has been checked against historical records, so what you're about to hear is history, not just legend. Some of these places are museums now. Others are just ash and foundations. All of them were once somebody's home. If you like tracking down the true stories behind places like this, go ahead and subscribe. It helps this channel keep making them. And drop a comment letting me know what state or country you're watching from tonight. Now, let's start the countdown from number 10 to the heaviest one on the list. Number 10 takes us away from any single house and into an entire abandoned neighborhood, sitting on the edge of a lake that many Californians consider one of the state's biggest man-made disasters. Bombay Beach sits on the shore of the Salton Sea, a body of water that was accidentally created in the early 1900s when floodwaters from the Colorado River broke through an irrigation canal and poured into a desert basin for nearly 2 years. By the 1950s and 60s, developers had turned the shoreline into a resort destination, and Bombay Beach became a getaway for vacationing families and even a few Hollywood names. Then the lake began to turn against the people who loved it. With no natural outlet, the water grew saltier every year, and agricultural runoff from nearby farms fed the rise in toxicity. Fish died by the millions, their bones washing up on the beach in drifts. Flooding in the 1970s pushed part of the town underwater permanently. As the smell and the health warnings spread, residents left, and many of them left everything behind. Furniture, toys, family photographs, entire houses simply locked and abandoned to the salt air. Today, block after block of empty homes still stand in Bombay Beach, some slowly being reclaimed by artists who use the ruins as canvases. Others just sitting exactly as they were left, waiting for owners who are never coming back. It's a strange, quiet kind of tragedy, an entire community's worth of homes abandoned not because of one violent night, but because of a slow-motion disaster that nobody could stop. From an accidental disaster, we moved to a home that was built on purpose, for a very different kind of experiment. One involving voices from beyond the grave. Number 9 is Villa Montezuma, a striking Victorian mansion in the Sherman Heights neighborhood of San Diego. It was built in 1887 for a touring pianist and self-described spiritualist named Jesse Shepherd, a man who had spent years performing for European royalty and claimed he could channel the spirits of dead composers through music. 2 wealthy local ranchers, so taken with Shepherd's talent, financed and built this ornate, almost temple-like home specifically for him, filling it with stained glass and elaborate woodwork designed to Shepherd's own specifications. Inside its walls, Shepherd reportedly held seances, inviting guests to witness him supposedly summoning the spirits of the dead through the piano. But the arrangement did not last. Barely 2 years after moving in, Shepherd sold the villa and left San Diego for good, and the men who had built it for him were left with mounting debts. What followed was a long, strange pattern. Owner after owner cycling through the house, several of them also drawn to spiritualism, several of them also ending up in financial ruin. The home changed hands, sat empty for stretches, and slowly built a reputation among locals as a place where luck simply did not survive. Eventually, the city of San Diego took ownership and turned it into a public museum, but even now, staff and visitors report unexplained footsteps and cold spots inside. Echoes, perhaps, of a house that was built for communication with the dead and never quite let go of that purpose. If a home built for seances feels unsettling, wait until you hear about a home built to shape troubled young minds. And what happened to the woman who cared for the boys who lived there. Number 8 is Preston Castle, a massive red brick Romanesque building perched on a hill above the small town of Ione in the California Gold Country. It opened in 1894 as the Preston School of Industry, a reform school for boys who had run afoul of the law, and for 66 years it served as a home in every real sense for hundreds of young wards of the state. Life inside was harsh. Former residents described brutal discipline, and the building's own history includes documented cases of wards dying from illness and outbreaks during its operation. Among the hundreds of boys who passed through its doors over the decades were a few who later became infamous in their own right, including a bootlegger who went on to run gambling ships off the California coast. But the darkest chapter came in 1950, when a well-liked housekeeper named Anna Corbin was found bludgeoned to death inside the building. A young ward was tried for her murder not once, but 3 times. 2 trials ended in deadlocked juries, and the third ended in acquittal. Anna Corbin's killer was never identified, and her case remains officially unsolved to this day. The school closed for good in 1960, and Preston Castle sat empty for decades afterward, its broken windows staring out over Ione as rumors of ghostly wards and Anna Corbin's restless spirit spread through the region. It's since been stabilized and opened for historical and paranormal tours, but for 40 years it stood as one of the great abandoned structures of Northern California. A home for hundreds of boys that ultimately kept one terrible secret. Speaking of buildings tied to institutions of power and control, our next entry sits on an island where the man in charge lived just steps from the cells he controlled. Number 7 takes us out into San Francisco Bay, to the ruins of the Warden's House on Alcatraz Island. Built in 1921, this 15-room mansion sat at the highest point of the island, deliberately positioned to overlook the cell house below. From 1934 to 1963, all 4 wardens of the federal penitentiary lived here with their families, hosting cocktail parties and holiday gatherings in a home of genuine luxury, just a short walk from some of the most dangerous inmates in the country. It was a strange kind of home, comfort and control living side by side, separated by a single wall and a private entrance that let the warden step directly from his living room into the prison he ran. After the penitentiary closed in 1963, the house sat empty, and Alcatraz itself became abandoned federal land. In November 1969, a group of Native American activists occupied the island for 19 months, protesting broken treaties and demanding recognition for indigenous rights, using empty buildings across the island, including the Warden's House, as shelter. Then, on June 1, 1970, fire tore through several structures on the island, including the Warden's House, the Lighthouse Keeper's Quarters, and the Old Post Exchange. The cause of the fire has never been officially settled. Today, all that remains of the Warden's House is a blackened shell of walls and foundations, a home of authority reduced to ruin during a protest against the very system it represented. From an island prison home, we head deep into the eastern Sierra, to a mining town so violent it earned a nickname that still follows it today. Number 6 is Cerro Gordo, a silver mining camp high in the Inyo Mountains, once considered California's bloodiest boomtown. At its peak in the 1870s, the town held roughly 5,000 residents. Once part of a settlement of about 400 buildings, only 20 of which still stand today, and by most historical accounts, the settlement averaged roughly one murder a week. Disputes over cards, claims, and insults settled with guns in a place with almost no law enforcement willing to make the climb. The last recorded killing came in December 1892, when a former postmaster named William Billy Croppo, furious over an election dispute, shot and killed the man who had replaced him, then vanished into the mountains and was never caught, despite a standing reward for his capture. His home, right next to the town's centerpiece, the American Hotel, stood for well over a century afterward as a kind of preserved crime scene, a house forever tied to an unsolved killing. In 2018, an entrepreneur named Brent Underwood purchased the entire ghost town, moving in to restore it and document the process online. Then, on June 15, 2020, almost exactly 149 years to the day after the American Hotel first opened its doors, an electrical fire ripped through the historic hotel and Croppo's old house, destroying both. What survived 130 years of desert weather and isolation did not survive a single night of faulty wiring. From one of California's deadliest boomtowns, we head into the desert one more time, into the story of two homes tied to the same man. A man whose name is now inseparable from some of the darkest crimes in American history. If you've made it this far, you already know we're only halfway through, and the entries are only getting heavier from here, so if you haven't already, now's a good time to hit subscribe before we keep going. Number 5 is Spahn Ranch, a sprawling movie set property tucked into the Simi Hills above Chatsworth, on the outskirts of Los Angeles. For decades, Spahn Ranch had been rented out for Western films and television shows, its false front saloon and jail standing in for countless frontier towns on screen. By the late 1960s, its owner, George Spahn, was elderly and losing his sight, and he allowed a group of young drifters led by a man named Charles Manson to move onto the property in exchange for chores and companionship. What followed was one of the darkest chapters in American criminal history. Living among the old film sets, Manson's followers, who called themselves the Family, spent months there through 1968 and 1969, and it was from this ranch that they departed on the nights of the Tate and LaBianca murders that August. For a while, the ranch functioned as an actual home to more than a dozen people, sleeping in old movie set buildings, sharing meals, following Manson's control almost completely. After the arrests that followed, the ranch briefly continued operating, until a wildfire tore through the Chatsworth Hills in September 1970, destroying almost everything that remained. George Spahn lived out his final years elsewhere and passed away in 1974. Today, the land is part of a state historic park, hiking trails winding through the same hills where a movie ranch once became the staging ground for a killing spree that shocked the country. From that first hideout, the story moves deeper into the desert to the isolated ranch house where it all finally came to an end. Number 4 is Barker Ranch. Tucked into a remote canyon on the edge of Death Valley. Built up gradually starting around 1940, the property was expanded in the 1950s by a couple named Jim and Arlene Barker, who added rooms and outbuildings to host family gatherings in one of the most isolated corners of the California desert. In late 1968, after leaving Spahn Ranch, Charles Manson and members of the family relocated here, drawn by the sheer remoteness of the location. A place where a school bus and a handful of dune buggies could disappear for weeks at a time. It was inside this small stone house, in October 1969, that law enforcement finally caught up with Manson. arresting him and several followers, initially only on suspicion of vandalism, before investigators connected them to the murders that had gripped Los Angeles. In 2008, investigators returned to the property with modern ground scanning technology, searching for possible additional burial sites linked to the family, though the search turned up no remains. Then, in May 2009, almost exactly 40 years after the murders that made this place infamous, the main house at Barker Ranch burned to the ground in a fire whose cause was never conclusively determined. Today, only rock walls and a concrete foundation remain, sitting inside Death Valley National Park, a home that sheltered a killer and then quietly erased itself 4 decades later. From 2 homes connected to the same infamous cult, we travel to the coast, to a house built directly on top of a gallows. Number 3 is the Whaley House in San Diego's Old Town, widely regarded as one of the most documented haunted homes in the country. In 1852, a small-time thief named James Yankee Jim Robinson was convicted of stealing a rowboat and sentenced to hang on a lot that would later become the Whaley property. The execution itself was reportedly botched, the gallows too short for Robinson's height, leaving him to die slowly rather than quickly. 3 years later, a businessman named Thomas Whaley purchased that same lot to build a home for his growing family, reportedly having witnessed the execution firsthand. Completed in 1857. The Whaley House became one of the first brick buildings in Southern California, serving at various times as a family residence, a general store, and even San Diego's second county courthouse. But tragedy followed the family early. Their 18-month-old son died of scarlet fever inside the house not long after they moved in, and Whaley himself later wrote in his own journal about hearing heavy, unexplained footsteps through the halls, footsteps he came to associate with the man hanged on his property years before. The house passed out of the family's daily use over time, weathering earthquakes, fires, and long stretches of vacancy before being restored and opened to the public. It now holds the distinction of being one of the few homes in America that the federal government has publicly acknowledged as reputed to be haunted. From a house built over a gallows, our next entry takes us to a house that was never really finished at all. Number 2 is the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, arguably the most famous eccentric mansion in the country. In 1886, Sarah Winchester, widow of firearms heir William Wirt Winchester and heiress to a fortune built on the Winchester rifle, purchased a modest 8-room farmhouse on the outskirts of San Jose. What followed was 38 years of continuous construction. Carpenters working around the clock, 7 days a week, with no master blueprint guiding the work. By the time Sarah Winchester died in September 1922, the farmhouse had grown into a sprawling maze-like mansion of more than 150 rooms, staircases that climb into ceilings, doors that open onto blank walls, and windows built into interior rooms with no view at all. A major earthquake in 1906 badly damaged the structure, and rather than fully rebuild, Sarah reportedly had the top 3 floors removed entirely, permanently reshaping the house into the 4-story mansion visitors see today. Popular legend claims Sarah believed she was cursed by the spirits of everyone ever killed by a Winchester rifle, and that a medium instructed her to keep building forever to appease them. A story that cannot be fully verified, but that took hold in local newspapers even during her lifetime. What can be verified is the sheer scale and strangeness of the construction itself, an architectural puzzle that still confuses engineers who study it today. After Sarah Winchester's death, construction stopped instantly, mid-project in some rooms, and the house has had no permanent resident since. It opened to the public less than a year later and has drawn millions of visitors, most of them chasing the same unanswered question Sarah Winchester left behind her. Was this grief, guilt, eccentric genius, or something else entirely? And now, the home that outweighs every other entry on this list. The one that never really let go of the night that ended it. Number 1 is the house on Glendower Place, in the Los Feliz Hills above Los Angeles, known to true crime researchers simply as the Los Feliz Murder Mansion. Built in 1925 in a grand Spanish Revival style, the home was purchased in the early 1950s by Dr. Harold Perelson, a respected cardiologist and medical professor, along with his wife Lillian and their 3 children. From the outside, it looked like a picture of post-war success. On the night of December 6, 1959, that picture shattered. In the early morning hours, Dr. Perelson struck his wife to death with a ball-peen hammer as she slept, then turned on his 18-year-old daughter, beating her before she managed to break free and run screaming to a neighbor's house for help. While the rest of the family was pulled from the house, Perelson swallowed a mixture of acid and sedatives, ending his own life on the floor beside his wife's body. No clear motive was ever confirmed, though later reporting pointed to serious hidden financial strain in the months before that night. What happened to the house afterward is almost as strange as the crime itself. Sold at a probate auction roughly a year later to a couple who never actually moved in, the home became little more than a storage space, its new owners occasionally seen carrying boxes inside, but never staying the night. When that couple passed away in the 1990s, ownership fell to their son, who also chose not to live there, later telling a reporter he simply didn't know if he could. For decades, neighbors and curious visitors peered through the windows to see the same scene over and over, a 1950s television set gathering dust. Furniture exactly where it had always been, and, according to persistent local accounts, a Christmas tree with wrapped presents still sitting beneath it, the same presents that were under that tree the night everything went wrong. The house finally sold in 2016 to an attorney and her husband who began renovation work, and then changed hands again in December 2020 when a real estate investor bought the property for just over $2 million. More than $1 million below the original asking price, still intent on finally closing the book on nearly 60 years of near total silence inside those walls. Of everything on this list, it is the quietest kind of tragedy. No fire, no gunfight, no legend needed. Just one terrible night that a family, a neighborhood, and eventually an entire city could not stop looking at. 10 homes, 10 very different reasons for being left behind. Fire, flood, murder, ruin, and grief that no one could undo. California holds more of these places than most people realize. Tucked into hillsides, deserts, and quiet residential streets that look completely ordinary until you learn what happened inside them. If one of these stories stuck with you, let me know which one down in the comments, and if you want more of California's darkest real history, there's plenty more where this came from. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.